I'm Harold Koh. I'm the Dean and Professor of International Human Rights Law at Yale Law School. And from 1998 to 2001, I was Assistant Secretary for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor at the State Department. How do we get the Bush administration to do more on Darfur? I think that requires us to understand process, policy, and pressure. Let me say a word about each. First, process. How is it that the policy on Darfur is being made? It's happening because of work that's being done in both the executive and legislative branches of government. In the Congress, the chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Joe Biden, is concerned about the issue, as are a number of the presidential candidates. The chair of the subcommittee on Africa in the Foreign Affairs Committee is Russ Feingold of Wisconsin, who has been extraordinarily energetic and knowledgeable about the Darfur issue. On the House side, the chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Tom Lantos, is a committed human rights activist, and there has been a tremendous amount of legislation that's been introduced. So congressional will is there on both sides of the aisle and can be used to try to promote political pressure on the administration to act. Within the administration, we have, of course, the White House, the National Security Council, National Security Advisor Steve Hadley, and then those parts of the National Security Council that work on African issues. In the State Department, political affairs is involved. Nick Burns, the Undersecretary, of course the Secretary of State, Condoleezza Rice. The Darfur issue has international organizations dimensions, particularly at the UN, and therefore is handled in part by the International Organizations Bureau. Policy planning, headed by Steve Krasner, a former professor at Stanford, plays a role. Africa Bureau, headed by Jendai Frazier. The humanitarian issues, addressed by the Humanitarian Affairs Bureau of the Undersecretariat for Global Affairs. My old bureau, the Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor Group. And then finally, the issue of international criminal accountability, which is handled by the Ambassador at Large for War Crimes issues, who is Pierre Prosper. There are also issues involving sanctions, which are done in conjunction with the Bureau for Economic and Business Affairs, which is run by a separate undersecretary. So that's the process. What has been the policy? A number of years ago, Secretary of State Colin Powell, who is deeply interested in these African issues, called the tragedy in Darfur a genocide. Under the Genocide Convention, that gave the United States an obligation to act to prevent genocide and to punish the perpetrators. But relatively little has happened since. A UN Security Council resolution was adopted, which referred some of the most severe cases to the International Criminal Court. Despite its objection to the International Criminal Court, the Bush administration let that resolution go forward, and particular prosecution cases are now being developed. They also called for the insertion of a peacekeeping force, but the force has not yet come in. On policy, most NGO groups and human rights groups, including Enough, the Center for American Progress, Human Rights Watch, and others, generally agree that we should follow the 4 Ps. First, a peace process. Generate a peace process which can lead to ending of the fighting. This obviously has to be done at a political level and through sustained diplomacy managed by the State Department. Second, punish the perpetrators, both through international criminal accountability, supporting the International Criminal Court's action on this regard, as well as the imposition of smart sanctions on the most responsible perpetrators, as well as sanctions targeted to blood oil monies. This is something that was announced a few weeks ago by the Bush administration. We want to make sure this is not too little, too late. Third, protecting people. We have a massive refugee problem in Darfur. It involves both thousands of trans-border refugees as well as internally displaced. And the question is how to make sure that they don't suffer and die because of humanitarian tragedy, lack of food, water, adequate medical care, and the like. And finally, inserting peacekeepers, getting Khartoum to agree to peacekeepers who can stabilize the situation on the ground, which minimizes the humanitarian problems and also permits a peace process to evolve. So that should be our focus on these 4 Ps: peace process, peacekeepers, punishing perpetrators, and protecting people. This leads to the final question, the one of pressure. What can you do? You now know who some of the people are who are playing the important roles. Media has covered Darfur, but there's a bit of fatigue after a while of covering these issues. 24 Hours for Darfur is a website which is designed to give people information so they can generate pressure toward your congressional executives, representatives, toward relevant members of the executive branch, to push on the same message with regard to policy and to highlight the victims in a way that makes it clear that real individuals are suffering and dying every day. We cannot let another genocide occur on our watch. It cannot be that when we say never again, we're really saying never again except in Africa. We have to do our best to use our understanding of the political process to generate a better policy and to put pressure on those involved to save the people who are being afflicted continually by a genocide in Darfur. Thank you.